The red flag on the mailbox had not moved in weeks, but the little dog still came. Morning after morning, she padded through the frostbitten roadside, her wiry coat dusted in white, nose lifted to sniff the breeze as if it might carry some long-lost scent. The snowbanks grew taller, the days grew shorter. Still, she waited. No collar, no tags, just that hopeful stare toward the bend in the road. Mr. Howard first saw her from behind his windshield, squinting past the wipers as he made his usual loop into town. A week passed, then two. Every morning the dog was there, sitting by the post like a statue carved from winter's patience, and every afternoon she was gone. He told himself not to stop. He told himself not to care, but something about the way she sat, expectant, unshaken, looked achingly familiar, like another goodbye he had never quite finished. One morning he noticed her paw was bleeding.
Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update.
The wind carried a hollow sound that morning, like it had forgotten the warmth of voices. Snow curled in lazy spirals across the empty road, piling in soft drifts against fences and mailboxes. Everything was still except the slow crawl of Mr. Howard's old pickup as it rattled past the same stretch of countryside he had driven for years. He barely looked anymore. His hands knew the wheel and his foot knew the brake. But that day, something flickered in the corner of his eye. A small figure, still as stone, sat beside the red mailbox that marked the bend in the road. It was a scruffy terrier, no larger than a feed sack and not much heavier by the look of her ribs. Her fur stuck out in crooked tufts like she had never known a brush. But she sat with a kind of dignity, tail tucked neatly around her feet, head high. Mr. Howard's eyes met hers for just a moment. Then the truck rolled on. He told himself it was not his business. Dogs get loose, they find their way home. But the next day she was there again, same spot, same silence. The red flag on the mailbox remained down. Over the course of the week, the weather turned. The skies grayed and the snow deepened. Mr. Howard began to expect her presence, though he never stopped. He watched through the windshield, wipers brushing snow from his view as the terrier remained, her breath fogging lightly in the cold. She was always gone by evening when he returned. The town's chatter never touched the place where she waited. There were no houses close by, no barking in the distance, just fence posts, bare trees, and a road that led to nowhere in particular. He started to wonder where she slept, what she ate, but he kept driving. In the warmth of his kitchen, Mr. Howard brewed weak coffee and told himself it was none of his concern. Still, he moved slower in the mornings now. He found himself lingering at the window longer, looking at the snow. He started carrying an extra glove in the truck, not because he needed it, but in case someone else might. One morning, while brushing snow off his windshield, he paused. There were paw prints in his driveway, tiny ones leading up to his front porch. They circled once, then trailed away toward the woods. He said nothing aloud, but he left a corner of toast uneaten on the porch rail the next day. She did not come to his door again. But every morning, Penny, though he did not yet know her name, waited by the mailbox, always watching, always hopeful. Then came the morning when he saw the blood. Just a smear in the white, a sharp contrast against the snow beneath her paw. Her leg was lifted slightly. She still held her posture, but her ears were low. Her tail, usually curled around her, lay flat against the ground. Mr. Howard pulled over. The truck idled behind him, coughing exhaust into the cold. He stepped out slowly, boots crunching against ice. The terrier watched him approach but did not move, not forward, not away. Just those soft eyes, guarded but tired, meeting his like she already knew his face. He crouched a few feet away. She shivered but did not retreat. "You do not belong out here," he whispered in the voice of someone who had not spoken much in months. She blinked slowly. Then she lay down, resting her muzzle on her uninjured paw, as if she had been waiting for this moment all along. Mr. Howard stood again, unsure of his next step. Snowflakes began to fall. Mr. Howard was not used to making sudden decisions. Life after retirement moved slow and predictable. Coffee at 7, truck warmed by 8, groceries on Thursday, church on Sunday if the roads were clear. But standing there in the snow, staring at a dog too tired to run and too loyal to leave, he broke his rhythm. He opened the passenger door. The terrier did not move at first. The engine's rumble and the squeak of the door seemed to weigh heavier than the wind. Mr. Howard gave a soft click of his tongue, then stepped back to give her space. For a long moment nothing happened. Then, as if summoned by some memory she still trusted, she rose. Her limp was slight but visible. She stepped through the snow, one paw hesitating, and placed both front feet on the truck's floorboard. He watched as she gathered her hind legs and pulled herself inside. He closed the door gently. The cab filled with the smell of cold fur and wet earth. They did not speak, not that he would have, and not that she could, but a strange understanding sat between them. She curled into a small ball on the worn seat, her eyes fluttering closed as the truck rumbled back onto the road. At home, Mr. Howard carried her in his arms. She weighed nearly nothing, just bones under fur and hope under silence. Inside, he laid an old quilt beside the stove and placed her down gently. She did not try to explore, she did not whine. She simply rested, nose buried in the warmth, body finally relaxed. Mr. Howard busied himself with things he had not done in years. He boiled chicken. He found a shallow dish for water. He rooted through the hall closet until he found a first aid kit. When he knelt beside her again, she lifted her head slightly. He offered a sliver of chicken. She took it carefully, lips barely touching his fingers. The cut on her paw was not deep, but it had crusted with dirt. He cleaned it slowly, whispering nothing in particular, just sounds, gentle and low, like how he used to speak to the plants in his greenhouse before the frost took them. She winced once but did not pull away. The snow outside thickened. By evening, the mailbox was no longer visible from the window. That night, Mr. Howard did not sleep well, not because the dog made noise, she did not, but because the quiet had changed. It was no longer the silence of emptiness. It was the silence of a question unasked. Where had she come from? In the morning, he opened the back door to see if she would run. She stood on the threshold for a moment, nose twitching, then turned back inside. She made her way to the front window and sat, gazing in the direction of the mailbox. He brought her breakfast on a chipped saucer. She began to follow him from room to room, never close enough to touch, but always within sight. When he read the paper, she lay near his chair. When he stirred soup, she watched from the hallway. If he stood still long enough, he would feel the light brush of her whiskers against his pant leg, testing the edge of closeness. 3 days passed. Then one morning she was gone. He had let her out just after dawn, assuming she would do her business and return like before. But when he opened the door again, the yard was empty. No paw prints, no sound. He waited. An hour passed. Then two. Mr. Howard found himself pacing. He checked the shed, the porch, the grove behind the fence. He walked to the edge of his driveway and looked down the road. Nothing. A part of him bristled at the feeling that had crept into his chest. Worry, he had told himself, he was only helping her recover. A few days of rest and she would move on, as dogs do. But when he reached his truck, there were fresh prints in the snow leading toward the bend. His heart tightened. He drove slow, scanning the roadside. There she was, curled beneath the red mailbox, head resting on her front paws. Mr. Howard pulled over, his breath fogging the windshield. He stepped out into the brittle morning light. She lifted her head slightly, tail giving one slow thump against the snow. She was waiting again, waiting for someone else. His steps were careful as he approached. He sat beside her in the snow, the cold seeping through his coat. He did not try to move her. He just watched the same empty road she watched. After a few minutes, he spoke. "Whoever you are waiting for, I do not think they are coming back." She did not move, but she let her head fall against his knee. The sky above was pale and cloudless. The world held its breath. Mr. Howard stood and brushed snow from his coat. He turned and walked toward the truck. When he opened the door, he did not look back, but after a few steps, he heard it, the light crunch of paws behind him. The days that followed settled into a rhythm neither of them had planned, but both seemed to accept. Penny, for that is what he had begun to call her, softly and only when she was not listening, no longer ventured to the mailbox each morning. Instead, she sat at the window while Mr. Howard prepared oatmeal, her head tilted as if she were deciphering his habits. She no longer flinched when he reached for his boots. She no longer circled the kitchen before lying down. Slowly, she was learning the shape of belonging, but every now and then she would stop mid-step or mid-sleep and glance toward the door. Just a pause, just a look, as if remembering she was supposed to be somewhere else. He did not try to erase that. He understood the echo of absence. On the 6th morning, he found her curled in the spot where his wife's chair used to sit, the corner where the light came in warmest. She fit there perfectly, small and careful, as if she knew not to disturb the space too much. Mr. Howard stood quietly in the doorway and let the stillness wrap around him. It had been nearly 3 winters since that chair had been touched. That afternoon, he drove to the hardware store and returned with a small engraved tag. He screwed it into the wall just above her sleeping place. It read simply, "Penny." He did not know if it was her real name. Maybe someone out there had whispered a different one into her ears. But this one felt right, soft on the tongue, resilient in the wind. The days stretched forward, cold and bright. Snow fell in softer patterns now, more like feathers than fists. Penny began to eat with more enthusiasm. She barked once when a squirrel darted across the porch. Mr. Howard laughed for the first time in months, but memory is not so easily buried, even beneath fresh snow. One afternoon, while Mr. Howard was hauling firewood, Penny slipped past the cracked back door and disappeared. He called out once, twice. Silence answered. He drove the truck to the bend. She was there again, at the mailbox. This time she was not sitting, she was digging. Just a shallow scrape in the snow near the base of the post. Her paws were clumsy from the cold, her claws scraping uselessly at the frozen ground. Mr. Howard stepped out and knelt beside her. There was something there, something wrapped in a bit of faded cloth. He brushed snow away and revealed a small child's mitten, red with a blue star stitched at the cuff, worn and stiff with ice. Penny nudged it gently with her nose, then backed away. She did not bark. She did not whimper. She simply looked up at him with eyes full of a story he did not know. He picked up the mitten and turned it over in his palm. There was no tag, no name, just a trace of warmth long gone. The pieces began to form quietly, painfully. Maybe she had waited here for someone smaller than himself, a child. Maybe this was where she had last seen them, a bus stop, a mailbox, a final drop-off before promises were broken. Perhaps the family moved, or the child never returned from wherever he went. Or worse, mystery. Howard did not speak. He tucked the mitten into his coat and offered his hand. Penny stepped toward him. They did not return home immediately. Instead, they sat together by the mailbox. The road was still, the wind barely whispering through the pine trees beyond the fence line. He placed the mitten back in the shallow hole and covered it again with snow. We will remember him here, he thought, though he said nothing aloud. Back at the house, Penny curled once again in her corner. Her breathing deepened quickly, as if the day had drained something from her. Mr. Howard sat in his armchair and stared at the fire. The silence was full but not lonely. That night, he dreamed of laughter and small feet on wooden floors. He dreamed of a leash in a child's hand and a dog trailing behind with a joyful yip. He woke before dawn with a wetness on his cheeks he did not try to wipe away. In the darkness, Penny lifted her head and looked at him. Then, without a sound, she crossed the room and laid her chin on his knee. He rested his hand on her back and left it there until morning. The wind had changed by the time February arrived. It no longer carried the sharp bite of January's grief, but blew with the sluggish hush of waiting, the kind of quiet only found in late winter, when even the trees seemed too tired to hope for spring. Mr. Howard began to leave the door cracked open during the day. Penny came and went as she pleased, though her paws stayed closer to the porch and her eyes wandered less toward the bend. She still paused sometimes, ears lifting at distant sounds, but she no longer rose to chase ghosts. Mr. Howard filled the time with small tasks he had once ignored. He repaired the screen door. He swept the porch each morning. He restocked the bird feeder and found himself watching the chickadees come and go while Penny slept by the fire. She had grown fuller now, her ribs no longer pressed like shadows through her fur, her eyes more alert, her steps more playful. One morning she followed him to the shed and pawed at a forgotten crate. He opened it to find old toys, cracked rubber balls, frayed rope, a deflated football. Penny dove in like a child, pulling out a faded tennis ball and prancing away with her tail high. He laughed again, twice in 1 month. That evening she dropped the ball at his feet, wagged once and barked, not a whine, not a demand, but a joyful sound, bright and brief. They played until the moon rose, but the winter was not done yet. March brought a bitter storm, a final snarl from the season that refused to die. Snow buried the roads. Ice bent the trees low. The power flickered and then failed. Mr. Howard lit candles and built a fire that he kept alive through the night. Penny stayed pressed against his side, her body a warm anchor against the cold, dark hours. When morning came, the house held its breath. The walls ached with silence. Penny's breath puffed soft clouds into the air. Mr. Howard stepped outside to find branches down and the mailbox bent at a sharp angle, the red flag dangling broken. He stared at it longer than he expected. That was when Penny bolted. 1 second she was at his feet. The next she was a blur across the yard, ears flat against her skull, body slicing through the snow like it owed her something. He called out. The sound caught in the wind and scattered. She was running toward the road. Mr. Howard stumbled forward, boots slipping, heart hammering. He reached the truck, but the keys were inside. By the time he fumbled into the cab, she was already a speck in the distance. He drove fast. At the bend, she was nowhere in sight. He stopped the truck in the center of the road and stepped out, snow crunching beneath him. He called again, his voice cracking. Then he saw it, faint tracks veering off into the trees. He followed them. The trail was thin, winding between pines and over brittle underbrush. Penny's paw prints wove a frantic path, as if pulled by something unseen. Mr. Howard's breath grew ragged. The wind pressed against his ears, but he kept going. And then in a small clearing dappled with weak sunlight, he saw her. She was standing in front of a wooden post, crooked, half-buried, splintered at the top. Something hung from it, a rusted chain, a bit of faded ribbon frayed by time. Penny was still, nose quivering, tail low. There had been something here once, a kennel, a leash, a home, or maybe just a memory. Mr. Howard stepped closer, boots sinking into snow. Penny turned and looked at him, her eyes deep with something between sorrow and release. He knelt beside her. They stayed there, man and dog, surrounded by the bones of what once was. Mr. Howard reached into his coat and pulled out the red mitten. He laid it gently at the base of the post. This time Penny did not dig. She simply sat beside him and rested her head against his shoulder. It was time to stop waiting. They walked home slowly together. As they reached the porch, Penny hesitated. Then she looked up at him and stepped inside first. He followed quietly. That night, Mr. Howard lit the fire early. He brought out a photograph album he had not touched in years. Penny lay at his feet, her breathing calm, her eyes half closed. He turned the pages slowly, one by one. Outside, the wind faded. The sky cleared, and for the first time in many winters, the stars returned. Spring did not arrive with trumpet calls or sunbursts. It came in quiet signs, the drip of thawing icicles, the crackle of mud under boots, the return of morning birdsong timidly breaking winter's silence. Penny noticed it first. Her nose lingered longer near patches of grass poking through the snow, her ears twitching toward chirps from the trees. She carried herself lighter now, no longer scanning the horizon for what would not come. Mr. Howard noticed too. The days grew longer, the air less bitter. He stopped wearing 2 pairs of socks. The fire went out before midday. On the first truly warm morning, he stood on the porch and listened to Penny barking joyfully at squirrels that dared cross her yard. Her tail beat a rhythm on the wooden steps, no longer curled tight in defense. The mailbox still leaned crooked from the storm. For weeks, Mr. Howard had left it as it was, a quiet tribute perhaps, or a hesitation he could not name. But one bright afternoon he fetched his tools from the shed. Penny followed, trotting behind him like a shadow stitched to his boots. They worked side by side as they now always did. He straightened the post. She lay nearby, eyes half-lidded but alert. He replaced the red flag. She wagged once when it clicked into place. As he stood back to inspect the work, a thought struck him. She never waits there anymore. It was not a loss. It was a sign. Later that week, he took her to the vet in town. She sat still on the scale, tail gently swishing, eyes patient. The vet smiled. Healthy, the woman said, a little older than we thought. Maybe 6, maybe 7, a survivor. Mr. Howard nodded. He already knew. On the drive home, he rolled the window down slightly. Penny stuck her nose out, the wind lifting her whiskers and flattening her ears. She looked content, not watchful, not waiting. Back at the house, Mr. Howard reached into the cupboard and pulled out a shallow tin box. Inside were things he had not touched in years. A collar, a leash, an old name tag that once jingled with every step. He set those aside. Then he took the tag he had bought weeks ago, the one that had hung above her bed. Penny, just that. He attached it to a new collar, pale blue to match the morning sky. When he knelt to fasten it around her neck, she stayed perfectly still, then leaned forward and licked his cheek. He chuckled, low and warm. The next day they went walking not toward the mailbox, but down the opposite direction, into the path that wound near the creek. Penny pranced like a pup in places, sniffing everything with interest, pausing now and then to glance back as if to say, "Are you coming?" He came. They walked that trail nearly every day after. Sometimes they went farther. Sometimes they sat in the sun beside the rocks and just listened. He began to hum again. Old tunes, forgotten words. Penny would rest her head on his boot and sigh as if to say, "This is enough." And it was. One morning in early May, a boy on a bicycle rode past the house. Penny barked once, a quick, curious sound, then settled again. Mr. Howard smiled. He found himself thinking of the red mitten buried beneath the snow months ago and how things once loved never truly vanish. They just rest for a while until someone remembers how to care again. That afternoon, he painted the mailbox a brighter red. Penny's paw print, carefully inked, went on the side. Neighbors began to stop by more often. Some brought treats, some just waved. Everyone knew the dog now, the scruffy terrier with the soft eyes and the proud little trot. The one who had waited and then stopped waiting. The one who had chosen again. And as for Mr. Howard, he no longer needed the radio to fill the quiet. The house was full in other ways. Each evening Penny took her place on the porch beside him, watching the wind rustle the grass, not for anyone who had left, but for everything that still lay ahead. The red flag on the mailbox stood straight again, and this time it moved, not with memory, but with mail, letters, invitations, notes from neighbors. And once a drawing from a child 2 houses down, a picture of a red mailbox and a dog sitting proudly beside it. Penny's ears perked when he held it up. Mr. Howard smiled. Then he leaned down and whispered something only she heard. "You are home now." She wagged twice, and the wind, finally warm, carried the sound of the flag rising.
Dogs truly are the most loyal companions in our lives. What did you think of this heartwarming story? Let us know in the comments. Like the video and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for daily emotional dog stories. Turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Click here to watch the next story of love, loyalty, and the incredible bond we share with our paw-some friends.